When I got home from work, I was shocked to find a cardboard box sitting at my doorstep. When I opened it, I froze. Inside was a newborn baby, my sister's child. My parents had left a note. "We're going to Barcelona. Take care of Eli." No call. Not a single message. Honestly, I panicked, but I still picked up the baby and brought him inside. I called my dad, my mom, and my sister, one by one. No one answered. An hour later, my parents finally replied, "We've withdrawn $41,800. Family needs to help family." I didn't know what to do in that moment. But after 3 sleepless nights and endless cries from that baby, I decided to act. But before I continue with the story, where are you watching this from? Leave a comment below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel, so I can tell you the whole truth. My name is Clara Bennett, 27 years old, a freelance graphic designer living in a quiet little town in Virginia. My parents, Eleanor and Richard, along with my older sister Vanessa, were always seen by outsiders as a warm family, the picture-perfect Christmas card kind. But beneath that glossy facade was something that never made me feel safe. I was always the reliable child, the one who yielded, who carried the burden, who knew when to stay silent, and for that, the one most easily dismissed. Vanessa was different. She grew up used to others cleaning up after her. I still vividly remember the time she left me alone in the park just to chase after her friends. I was 7, trembling among strangers for nearly an hour, until a kind old lady asked if I was lost. And when I was 20, in my second year of college, Vanessa invited me to dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant, cheerfully ordering food and chatting as if she'd never hurt anyone. But halfway through the meal, she excused herself abruptly and left, leaving me with a $200 bill and the suspicious stares of the waitstaff. But my parents always said, "Vanessa's just a bit impulsive, don't take it personally." When Vanessa gave birth to a boy named Eli, none of us knew who the father was. She only vaguely said it was personal. But less than 4 months after giving birth, she fell in love with a foreign man, had a whirlwind wedding, and moved to Barcelona. That new husband loved kids, but had no idea Vanessa already had one. She kept Eli a secret, preserving her flawless image for her new marriage. And Eli? A 4-month-old baby, abandoned to my parents, like an unspoken burden. My mother often complained that he cried all night, wouldn't feed, kept her up, and ruined her plans to go to the spa with friends. When Eli was 6 months old, they suddenly dropped him at my doorstep with a note of just 8 words. "We're going to Barcelona. Take care of Eli." No call, no explanation, just a few diapers, some formula equipment. I panicked. I wasn't a mother. I was never prepared for this. But I picked the baby up and held him inside, because at that moment, I was the only one left. I logged back into our shared family account, the one I used to deposit money into after every successful project, to help my parents fix a house, pay off credit card debt, only to find it empty. $41,800 gone. I checked again, called the bank to confirm, and then, like a final stab, I received a text from Eleanor. "We took the money. Family should help family." I called my mother. No one answered. I texted my father. No reply. I emailed Vanessa. Ignored. The feeling of being left behind, of having everything taken, of being treated as if every sacrifice I'd made was expected. It didn't feel like pain, it felt like a freezing punch to the chest. And I knew, this wasn't about helping family anymore. This was betrayal. And I had to do something, not just for myself, but for the child they abandoned into my arms. I looked at Eli lying on my sofa, his round black eyes scanning the unfamiliar room. He wasn't crying, but he wheezed, limbs curling from the cold. Eleanor hadn't even left a blanket. I wrapped him in an old wool scarf and made formula from nearly expired powder, my hands trembling with fear. The last time I held an infant was 10 years ago as a volunteer at an orphanage. I laid him on the bed, but the moment I turned away, a piercing wail erupted. The cry of a 6-month-old can shatter the silence of an entire night. I picked him up again, pacing circles in my tiny living room, humming an old tune. "We're going to be okay, Eli. We're going to be okay." But saying it was one thing. In reality, I was terrified. My inbox was flooded with client emails. A book cover design for an author in New York was nearing deadline, but I couldn't focus while Eli sobbed, spit up on my shirt, and collapsed from exhaustion. I wiped the milk with a kitchen towel, had no baby clothes, no idea what room temperature was best for an infant. I searched online, caring for a baby with no experience. But between the glowing screen and Eli's labored breaths, I sat frozen. I set alarms for every 3 hours, checking if he was breathing. Sometimes I'd bolt upright because he was too quiet. The first 3 nights were a swamp. I stayed awake, guarding him while working on a logo for a small cafe in Vermont. One arm cradled Eli, the other dragged a mouse. Sometimes I confused the logo's outline with the curve of his sleepy eyelids, both blurry, both needing adjustment. I didn't dare think about tomorrow. I only knew that hour by hour, minute by minute, I was holding it all together, not because I wanted to be a mother, but because no one else would. No one else stayed. And for some reason, Eli didn't cry when I held him. Only when I let go. I didn't call my boyfriend, Noah. Didn't text. Didn't explain. Didn't want to drag him into this chaos. But one Saturday afternoon, as I struggled to change Eli's diaper with the last one left, clearly too tight, making him cry in discomfort, there was a knock on the door. 3 times, hesitant. I opened it, hair damp with sweat, shirt stained with milk, eyes dark as if I'd survived a war, and there was Noah, holding a pizza box, face both relieved and surprised. "Clara, you haven't answered my messages in 3 days." I started to worry. I opened my mouth, but my throat closed up. Eli was still crying, the sour smell of milk and the mess of the apartment thickening the air. I broke down, crying, for the first time since it all began. No sound, just tears falling like a broken faucet that wouldn't shut off. Noah didn't ask anything else. He walked straight to the kitchen, opened cupboards, checked the fridge, then his phone. "Target's open until 10. I'll be back." And less than an hour later, Noah returned with 3 large bags, diapers, wipes, baby clothes, bottles, and a brown teddy bear. He crouched down, placed the bear beside Eli, and softly said, "Hi there, little man. I'm Noah. I'm here to help your mom a bit, okay?" That night, for the first time, I slept a full 3 hours. Noah carried Eli around the apartment, whistling and recounting a failed ad campaign he once worked on, like speaking to a very young colleague. Eli stopped crying, eyes wide as if realizing this was someone who wouldn't leave. In the days that followed, Noah came every evening after work. He brought food, made formula, changed diapers, even practiced color grading in Photoshop so I could rest. "We'll do this together. You're not alone," he said, adjusting the contrast on a design I thought I'd finished. I didn't reply, just nodded. But inside, something began to shift. Not love, not yet, but a rare sense of safety in a world that had turned its back. I didn't tell Noah the full story, about the money, the shared account, the terrifying silence from the people I once called family, but I knew sooner or later I would, because Noah hadn't just come to help, he came to stay. On a weekend morning, I was feeding Eli when the doorbell rang, one long, decisive ring, not the timid knock of a neighbor or mailman. I put the bottle down, stepped to the door, slightly on edge, and in front of me stood a woman in her 60s, gray hair clipped neatly back, holding a large fabric bag full of vegetables, a box of sandwiches, and a slightly faded wool blanket. She looked at me and smiled gently. "You must be Clara." "I'm Maggie, your mother's sister." I froze for a moment. Maggie. The name I'd heard in passing over family dinners, always dismissed by Eleanor like a blemish from the past. I invited her in, while Eli flailed his arms from the chair, sensing a stranger nearby. Maggie wasn't fazed. She leaned down, touched Eli's hand, and said softly, "You're a handsome boy. You and your mom have the same eyes. Did you know that?" Then she turned to me, as if she already sensed my 1,000 questions. "I know your mother didn't talk much about me, but when I heard that Vanessa abandoned Eli and Eleanor disappeared, I knew I couldn't stay away anymore." We sat at the kitchen table. I made tea while Maggie unpacked a lunchbox, steamed vegetables, and oat cookies. "You've lost weight," she said, eyes kind but deep. I laughed lightly. "I don't even know when to eat anymore." And then, as if something burst, I told Maggie everything. From the 8-word note, the empty bank account, to the sleepless nights not knowing what tomorrow would bring. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just listened. And after a while she said, "You know, your mother once left your grandmother, on her 50th birthday, just because she didn't get the necklace she wanted. That's when I realized Eleanor always chose herself over family. Always." I stayed silent. Scattered memories lined up. How my mother always defended Vanessa, how she hid the bills I paid, how every complaint in the house landed on me because I was the reasonable one. "And I believe," Maggie continued, "this isn't just a one-time abandonment, it's a long chain of irresponsibility, a different shape in each generation. You're the first to say, 'Enough.'" I looked at Eli. He'd fallen asleep in the teddy bear's embrace, hands clinging to the bottle like a lifeline. And I knew, though I was still tired, still angry, still hurt, with Maggie's arrival, I was no longer the only daughter left in the dark. Someone in this family had chosen to stand with me. That night, after Eli had fallen asleep, I brewed a lukewarm cup of coffee, turned on the desk lamp, and quietly opened my mother's old laptop. I had found it after using a spare key to unlock my parents' house, the laptop tucked into the lowest drawer of Eleanor's bedroom, as if she no longer cared about it. I had hesitated for 3 days because part of me still hoped she was just on a short vacation, still believed there might be an explanation. But when the screen lit up and the auto login displayed the words, "Welcome, Eleanor," my heart sank. This wasn't a short trip. This was a calculated retreat. In a folder labeled Spain, I found what, if this were a documentary, would be called pre-behavior evidence. A 1-year lease agreement for an apartment in Barcelona, paid in full via wire transfer from an account under the name Richard Bennett. A PDF file containing a detailed 3-week travel itinerary, arrival dates, accommodations, restaurant reservations, tourist spots. And finally, a photo album, including pictures of them standing in front of the Spanish apartment, smiling broadly, raising glasses of white wine, taken just 3 days after they dropped Eli at my door. Not a single mention of me, not a word about Eli, no trace of the 6-month-old child they called their grandson. I sat there, my hands trembling. But what left me frozen wasn't their joy. It was a yellow folder labeled with documents titled Temporary Guardianship Authorization. My name was listed at the bottom. Signature scanned, not handwritten. I pulled out an old printed form of mine from my document box, compared each line. They forged it. They transferred guardianship to me, without ever asking. Just so they could leave freely. I stepped out of the bedroom and sat on the living room floor, turning on every light. The apartment was silent, except for Eli's steady breathing. I stared at the printed documents, each line like a truth I hadn't wanted to face. They didn't just leave. They planned for me to be the only one left with responsibility, legal and emotional. No apology, no phone call. I opened my email and sent a short message to Maggie. "Do you know anyone trustworthy legally? I need help." 5 minutes later, she replied, "Yes, his name is James, very thorough. I'll call him for you tomorrow morning." I shut the laptop, but inside me, a switch had flipped. I knew that if I didn't speak up, no one would do it for me. and I couldn't let Eli grow up in a family where silence meant consent. James Parker arrived at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday, just as Maggie had promised. He was in his 40s, wearing a pale blue shirt, carrying a slim leather briefcase and a notebook with frayed edges. He didn't have the polished air of a corporate attorney, but rather the weight of someone who'd handled hard cases, where the law wasn't just paperwork, but a weapon. I brewed coffee, poured him a cup, and opened the laptop, laying out the documents I'd printed: the Barcelona lease, travel photos, the dubious guardianship transfer, bank statements. James flipped through each page, nodding quietly as he read. When he reached the message from Eleanor, simply, "We're going to Barcelona. Take care of Eli." He looked up, brow furrowed. "You didn't sign this guardianship form?" I shook my head. The signature was scanned from an old document. I have the original for comparison. He nodded and jotted down notes. "Good. This is legal document forgery, and if we can prove the intent was to abandon responsibility for a minor, they can be pursued both civilly and criminally." My heart pounded, not from fear, but because, for the first time, someone validated that what I'd endured wasn't in my head. "They also emptied the joint account," I added, pulling up the statement. James leaned in, eyes on the transfer line. $41,800 to an account at Meridian Trust, a bank in Belize. His face darkened. "Meridian Trust is a tax haven. That transaction needs to be examined." I said nothing, not from shock, but from rage. Every excuse I'd made for them. Maybe they were tired, maybe it was just a mistake. All collapsed. James opened his notebook and handed me a list. "I need you to collect the following. 1. All messages from Eleanor, Richard, and Vanessa. 2. Call logs, if any. 3. Bank confirmation that you did not authorize the transaction. 4. Any proof you've been Eli's sole caregiver for the past 60 days. Photos, emails, work schedules, everything." I nodded, taking careful notes. "And Vanessa?" "She hasn't said a word." James smirked. "No response only hurts their case. But if there's evidence she consented to abandonment, say a message denying responsibility, that's key." I paused, then walked into the bedroom, pulled out an old phone. It still held the recording of a call from 2 weeks ago, when I tried reaching Vanessa after my mother's message. My voice was shaking with anger. Hers was calm. "You always make things complicated. Eli's your problem now. Don't drag Mom into this." I placed the phone on the table, played the recording. James listened without blinking. When it ended, he simply said, "I'll back this up and add it to the file." I looked at him, and a strange emotion rose. Not relief, but a sharp, forming resolve. I had once believed that if I endured long enough, things would pass. But Eli didn't need someone who endured. He needed someone who stood up. And, for the first time, I knew I would be that person, even if I had to stand against those who shared my name. I taped James's checklist to the inside of the kitchen cabinet, each bullet point like an order that had to be fulfilled. But beyond the legal and investigative work, I had a greater task: caring for a 6-month-old baby, teething and chronically sleep-deprived. Eli began having prolonged fits, cries not from hunger or exhaustion, but from a small body agitated in its own skin. I woke every 2 hours, carrying him around the room, playing white noise, applying teething gel, catching brief naps like blinks. Once, I fell asleep mid-email to a client and woke to a blank screen. The deadline for a cafe startup's logo design was 2 days away, so I squeezed in Photoshop whenever Eli slept, adjusting hues, vector lines, with the laptop perched on the dining chair, one foot rocking the bassinet, one hand editing. Noah still came every evening, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with takeout. He didn't talk much, but always knew exactly what I needed. One night, he brought a bag full of power banks and a USB adapter. "Just in case the power goes out," he said. I smiled, so drained it barely showed, but inside, I knew I couldn't fall apart. Not now. Maggie also visited each weekend. She brought a large bag of old toys and neatly folded baby onesies. "I don't have much money," she said, "but I have things your sister never gave anyone." Every time she came, I felt less alone, like someone who knew Eleanor's past but still chose to stand beside me. And Eli, though he couldn't speak, seemed to sense the difference. He began to smile more, clung to my hand when I lifted him, and when I spoke, stared at me without blinking, as if this voice was the only safe thing in the world. In those moments, my heart softened. Even though James's document deadline loomed, the electricity bill was due, and a recent Upwork order was canceled because I sent it late, I kept going. I chose to stay. Because I knew, if I collapsed, Eli had no one. And I'd rather be exhausted from love than peaceful from turning my back like they did. I spread every document across the living room floor: receipts, texts, email screenshots, bank statements, and the call recording from Vanessa that James had backed up. Every small detail could be evidence. I couldn't afford to overlook a single thing. I created a Google Drive folder titled Eli Guardianship with subfolders: finance, messaging, email correspondence, abandonment, recordings. I numbered each section, noted dates, context, involved parties. Maggie helped me print every page, storing them in hard binders. Noah bought me an external drive. "Better safe than sorry," he said, "in case they try to deny everything." I nodded, but I knew they wouldn't deny it, because they'd never admitted anything. Every action, every silence was crafted as if this betrayal had never happened. I dug through Eleanor's emails. One line stood out: "Family should help family." I printed it, marked it in red. James said words like that, when paired with taking money and abandoning a child, could be used to prove evasion of financial responsibility. I labeled it money transfer, personal motive. Then Vanessa's number flashed on my screen. A chill ran down my spine. It had been over a month since she last contacted me. I pressed record. "Hello?" I said. Static, then her familiar voice, cold and clear. "Clara, what are you doing?" "Mom said you're gathering evidence?" "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "I mean you abandoned your son. No explanation, not even a blanket. And now you ask what I mean?" Silence. Then Vanessa laughed, a hollow, thin laugh. "You always make everything complicated. Let Mom and Dad be, and Eli, he's your problem now. I've got my own life." I clenched the phone. "Your life can't be built on abandonment. I won't stay silent." "Suit yourself." Her voice was curt. "But if you want to fight, don't expect to have a family anymore." I looked at Eli sleeping, his tiny hands resting on his chest as if holding himself together. "My family is already gone," I said, hoarse. "And you laid the first stone." I hung up. No yelling, no screaming. Just a final click. Then I saved the recording file, labeled it Vanessa Call Confrontation.mp3. I sat back at the table and added to the evidence list: call recording, Vanessa denies responsibility. Warns Clara about no more family. No mention of Eli. I don't know how the court will go, but I know one thing. For the first time in my life, I'm no longer afraid of the people I once called family. And that is why I won't stop. I was washing Eli's bottle when I heard a knock on the door. 3 knocks. Firm, not Noah, not Maggie. Something instinctual made me dry my hands quickly and walk over, and I froze. Eleanor, Richard. My mother wore a dark brown leather coat, red lipstick, her hair softly curled and neat. My father wore a white shirt, light khaki trousers, and held a small gift bag, printed with the words, "For our dear Eli." They stood there, as if the last time they hadn't abandoned me and Eli with a curt message. "We'd like to visit the baby," my mother said, her voice as light as air. I didn't move. The door was only half open. "Clara," my father interjected, "you don't have to make this a big deal. We're family, after all. I let out a quiet, joyless laugh. Family? My mother placed her hand on her chest, tilting her head slightly. I know there's been some misunderstanding lately. But Eli must miss his grandparents, and I miss him. I said nothing. I simply turned, picked up Eli. He was sucking on his pacifier, eyes half closed with sleep. I brought him to the door but didn't step out. Didn't let them touch him. If you truly missed Eli, I said calmly, you wouldn't have left him with just a note. And you certainly wouldn't have used the money I sent to rent an apartment in Barcelona. Eleanor flinched. Clara, you're exaggerating. We just thought you'd help, like always. No, I cut her off. This time I'm not helping. This time I'm documenting. I placed my phone on the table near the door. It was recording. Mom, Dad, I said slowly. If you want to see Eli, wait for a supervised visitation order from the court. My lawyer will be in touch soon. But right now, I can't let him be around people who once saw him as a burden. Richard frowned. Clara, you're making this worse. I looked him straight in the eye. Number you did. I'm just picking up the pieces so Eli doesn't grow up in a lie. Eleanor opened her mouth to say something, but then met my eyes, the kind that no longer begged for love, only carried silent resolve. She paused, then turned away. No, goodbye. Richard left the gift bag on the doorstep. I didn't pick it up. When the door closed, I stood still, heart racing. Not from fear, but from something both painful and freeing. Eli buried his head into my shoulder, nestled in. I stroked his hair and whispered, "No one will take you from me again. No one." On the other side of the door, I knew they'd start striking back, but this time I had a lawyer, evidence, Maggie, Noah, and most importantly, I had myself. The following evening, I went to James's office with a USB drive containing all the organized documents. He sat behind a walnut desk, flipping through pages like reading a courtroom script, word for word, no errors allowed. Very thorough, he nodded. Now it's time to trace the money. James asked me to pull up the transaction, $41,800. We need to scrutinize this, he said. Did you receive any email or notification before it happened? I shook my head. The account was jointly named by the three of us, but I never had approval rights. James nodded. We've already submitted a request for confirmation to the bank. If the recipient account matches Eleanor or Richard's name, we'll have grounds to claim financial misuse for personal gain. I looked at the statement. Each number like an accusation. Not because of the amount, but the audacity. They used the money I sent to leave their grandchild with me. As I stood to leave, James added, "One more thing. We need to strengthen the character foundation. Has your mother, Eleanor, shown selfish behavior prior to this incident?" I nodded. Yes. My aunt, Maggie, knows more. She's Eleanor's sister. Good, James said. You could request a written affidavit. Or, if needed, we can call her as a witness. That evening, I visited Maggie. She was arranging chrysanthemums into a porcelain vase at the kitchen table. I relayed James's words, then asked, "Would you be willing to testify?" Maggie didn't answer immediately. She poured me a cup of ginger tea, then sat down, her hand resting on mine. Clara, I stayed silent for 40 years, because I thought blood ties meant keeping family secrets. But if you need me now, I will speak. I squeezed her hand, and so Maggie began to tell me, her voice steady, without bitterness, but rich in detail. She spoke of the time Eleanor cut off their mother over not receiving a sapphire necklace, when Eleanor pressured an ex-boyfriend into an abortion, then denied everything to the family. When she forged a scholarship letter for Vanessa and told the relatives Vanessa earned it. She's always chosen whatever polished her image, Maggie said, and eliminated anyone who made her look bad. I wrote everything down, dates, places, every memory. Back home, I updated the case file, adding behavioral history, witness, Maggie Ellis. I no longer felt like someone chasing answers. I was building a narrative, this time a truthful one. And I knew if I told it right, the judge would see what I've long seen. I'm not just a caretaker. I'm the only one who chose to protect Eli when everyone else turned away. I submitted the petition on a Wednesday morning, the sky softly gray, mist still clinging to the courthouse steps in Arlington County. Noah came with me, carrying a brown folder filled with hard copies of everything: bank documents, message screenshots, call recordings, Maggie's statement, a pediatrician's letter confirming I'd been Eli's full-time caregiver for over 2 months. I held the file with both hands, as if cradling both truth and my exhaustion. At the filing desk, the clerk read the application heading: Petition for Full Guardianship of Minor, Eli Bennett. I nodded. She carefully stamped it, signed, and handed me a copy. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for the 8th of next month, 10 a.m. The court will notify all involved parties. I signed the receipt, and as I stepped out the courthouse door, my hands were ice cold, not from the weather, but because I knew, at this moment, I had officially entered a battle. No more ignored emails, no more unanswered calls. This was real confrontation between me and those who once shared the name Bennett. That afternoon, James emailed confirmation. I will represent Clara Bennett through the entire process. The preliminary hearing will establish the legal basis for guardianship. In many cases like this, families claim there was a verbal agreement, or it was only temporary. But, Clara, we have evidence. And more importantly, you have consistency. I printed that email and pinned it to the board beside my desk. Beneath it was a photo of Eli sleeping, arms wrapped around his teddy bear, mouth slightly open, as if dreaming of something kind. I knew the courtroom might be a harsh place, but it was the only place I could claim justice. Not for me, but for a child who couldn't yet speak, yet had already been bargained away like leftover furniture. And for the first time since this all began, I sat down, opened my design software, not for work, but to draw something for myself. A pale yellow circle, surrounded by jagged broken lines, from which a branch began to grow. I called it the second birth of a mother. Because I knew, from that courtroom on, I would never be the same person again. In the days after filing the petition, my apartment felt unusually quiet. No more hurried footsteps, no endless messages demanding favors, no late-night calls asking for help or money. But within that silence, I could feel it clearly. They had switched weapons to sweet manipulation, the old way. The first message came from Eleanor. Not long, not harsh, but dangerously delicate. I hope you still remember, no matter what. We're blood. The court won't understand that. I didn't reply, but I took a screenshot and saved it in the folder. Emotional pressure, phase 1. The next day, I received a package. Inside was a cream-colored wool sweater, the one I wore at 16 when we took our family Christmas photo. Along with it, a handwritten note from Richard. Hope this reminds you of those days. We shouldn't let lawyers come between family. I folded the sweater, placed it in the bottom drawer. No tears, no trembling, but my hands were cold because I realized they weren't sorry. They only regretted that I no longer stayed silent. One evening, while feeding Eli, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. But the writing style was chillingly familiar. Some things are best kept in the family. If it all falls apart, it won't be Ellis's granddaughter who suffers. It'll be Clara. I forwarded it to James immediately. He called back within 5 minutes. This is indirect intimidation, but good. It shows they're worried. Keep documenting. Stay steady. I'm okay, I said, just tired. James paused. I know, but you're doing everything right. I hung up, looked over at Eli sleeping. He'd started rolling over, giggling when I clapped to cheer him on. His first laughs sounded like nothing I'd ever heard in the old family home. I realized Eli was growing up in a small apartment but a safe one. No yelling, no blame, no one making him feel like a burden. I wrote a line in my journal and pinned it to the board above my desk. Real family doesn't send guilt in parcels. They show love by showing up. And I knew, no matter what they tried, no matter the hearing ahead, I wouldn't go back. Because I'm no longer looking for blood. I'm building a home. On Monday morning, an email from James appeared in my inbox, titled simply, Meridian Trust, Verification Complete. I opened it, my chest hollow. Inside was a verification report from the independent legal investigator James had hired, a detailed ledger of transfers from the joint account under Eleanor and Richard Bennett, sent to an offshore account in Belize, directly owned by Eleanor, with a secondary beneficiary listed as Vanessa R. Bennett. The total amount, $41,800. Every dollar I had contributed over the past 3 years, small amounts from every design contract payment, every time I cut back my own living expenses to help fix the roof, cover Richard's hospital bills, or pay Vanessa's short course tuition. Every cry for help, now reduced to numbers. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I simply printed every page and laid them out on the table like a deck of cards, preparing for the final move. That night, Maggie came over. She brought an old wooden box filled with handwritten letters from my grandmother, proof that Eleanor once disappeared in 1991, right after their mother had heart surgery. "Clara," she said, "everyone thinks she only recently got this bad. But no, she's just good at hiding." I placed my hand on the box and whispered, "I won't hide anymore." Noah printed the final file set, labeled, sorted, packed neatly in a silver gray case. "I'll come with you that day," he said, not asking. I nodded. Eli sat on the mat, clutching an old plastic rattle Maggie had brought. He laughed, a loud laugh, his first in days. I sat on the floor and held him in my arms. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, "Tomorrow I don't walk into that courtroom as a betrayed daughter. I walk in as a mother." And when I turned off the lights, the room darkened, not with loneliness, but with the stillness of someone who is ready. I knew that the next morning, when the courtroom doors opened, I wouldn't tremble. Because this time, I wasn't walking in to be acknowledged. I was walking in to claim what was right, not just for me, but for a child who cannot yet speak, but deserves a voice. The courtroom on Thursday morning smelled of old wood and cold white light. I entered with James, my hand gripping the gray case. Inside were all the sleepless nights, every collected proof, every silent tear no one had seen. Noah sat behind me, upright, eyes steady on me like a quiet anchor. Maggie was there too, holding a moss-green notebook, her silver hair loosely tied. Across the room, Eleanor and Richard arrived, dressed impeccably. She in a gray dress, he in a charcoal blazer. Not a glance of apology, not averted eyes. They sat on the defendant's bench beside their lawyer, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes. When the judge, a woman of Asian descent in her 50s, entered, everyone stood. She sat, tapped her gavel. "This preliminary hearing regarding the guardianship of Eli Bennett is now in session," James began, his voice low, clear, deliberate. No grand language, just firm, simple statements. "My client, Clara Bennett, is currently the sole caregiver of Eli, continuously for nearly 3 months, without any material, emotional, or legal support from her biological parents, Eleanor and Richard Bennett. We will present evidence of intentional abandonment, financial fraud, and legal manipulation to offload guardianship onto the petitioner, without her knowledge or consent." The judge nodded. "Do you have proof?" James opened the case, placing items on the table, one by one. The printed message from Eleanor, "We're going to Barcelona. Take care of Eli." The red-stamped bank statement confirming the transfer to Belize, travel photos from Spain taken days after leaving Eli. Finally, The guardianship document with the forged signature. This handwriting, James said, has been verified by a handwriting expert, copied from a 2017 document, not my client's current signature. I looked at Eleanor. She remained composed, but her hand clenched her lap. Richard glanced at her, frowning, the first sign of irritation. James continued, "And this is an audio recording of their daughter, Vanessa Bennett, who gave birth to Eli but abandoned the child without paperwork, custody plans, and explicitly stated, 'Eli is your problem now. Don't involve Mom.'" The recording played. The courtroom fell silent. My voice, strained, steady. Vanessa's, cold, evasive. When the beep marked the end of the recording, the judge looked up. "Does the defense counsel have a rebuttal?" The opposing lawyer stood, adjusted his tie. "We acknowledge a breakdown in family communication, but the Bennetts fully believed Clara, a capable adult acting of her own free will, chose to care for Eli voluntarily. The transfer was a temporary advance for travel expenses, previously agreed upon verbally." James cut in. "If there was an agreement, why forge the signature? And if they trusted her, why no child support, no phone calls, no appearance? For over 2 months?" The judge raised her hand. "Enough. We'll proceed with the petitioner's testimony in the next session. This morning's hearing is adjourned." She struck the gavel. Everyone stood. I exhaled. Not relief, but composure. As I exited the courtroom, Eleanor looked at me for a second, not with anger, but with unfamiliarity, as if seeing someone no longer on the board she used to play. And that's right. For the first time, I entered the game, not to beg forgiveness, but to reclaim a truth, that love is not a bargain left behind. In the afternoon session, the judge called me to the witness stand. James nodded to me gently. I stood, handed Eli to Noah sitting behind me, then walked slowly to the stand. Inside me were hundreds of fragments, not just from the past 3 months, but from a lifetime growing up in a so-called family. I placed my hand on the Bible. "I, Clara Bennett, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." My voice rang out, steadier than I expected. James approached, beginning, "Clara, can you tell the court why you are petitioning for legal guardianship of Eli Bennett?" I looked at Eli, lying in Noah's arms, chewing on a soft biscuit, eyes locked on me as if knowing this mattered. I took a deep breath. Because no one else stayed. I didn't speak loudly, but the room fell silent. "Vanessa, my sister, gave birth to Eli 6 months ago. She never named the father, never registered his birth fully. When Eli was 4 months old, she got married and moved to Barcelona, leaving the baby with our parents. But when Eli started crying more, eating less, sleeping poorly, they sent me a message. 'We're going to Barcelona. Take care of Eli.' No explanation, no diapers, no milk, no one returned. I pulled a printout of the message from my pocket, held it up. They called it trust. I call it abandonment." My voice grew hoarse. I looked at the judge. I didn't know how to be a mother, but I learned. I didn't have much money, but I worked nights to support him. I had no one, until Eli grabbed my hand one night through his cries, and didn't let go. I paused. Not from emotion, but to let each word settle. I called Vanessa. I begged her to return, but she said only, "Eli is your problem now. Don't involve Mom." I played the recording from my phone. No one objected. The courtroom echoed with Vanessa's voice, cold and distant. When it ended, I turned toward Eleanor. My mother, Eleanor Bennett, withdrew every dollar I ever sent to the family account, over $40,000. The evidence has been verified. They used that money to move to Europe and forged my signature on guardianship documents. I have both the real and forged versions. I never signed, but they decided for me, as they always have. I raised my head, voice unwavering. They didn't just leave. They left with intent, not to return. James approached with one final question. "So, Clara, what are you asking of the court today?" I looked toward Eli and smiled. Not a victorious smile, but the smile of a mother who knows she's doing what's right. I don't want revenge. I don't want them jailed. I just want the legal right to care for Eli, so he won't be a child no one is responsible for, so I can take him to the doctor without fake authorization, so he can be recognized as a child who has a mother, and if no one else will do that, then I will. The judge nodded, taking notes. I stepped down. Noah stood and steadied me. Eli reached for me as he always does, and I lifted him. Inside a room full of people who once treated me as expendable, I knew I no longer needed to prove anything. I just needed to hold on to this child, with all I had, and all they had, left behind. The judge returned after more than an hour of deliberation. The courtroom remained so quiet I could hear Eli's breathing, asleep in Noah's arms. I didn't know what to expect. Not victory, not apologies. Just, this time, that the truth would not be ignored like it always had in their house. The judge placed her glasses on the desk, opened the file. After reviewing all submitted evidence, testimonies, verified documents, along with the direct testimony of the petitioner Clara Bennett and the significant absence of responsibility from the respondents Eleanor and Richard Bennett, I hereby deliver the following ruling. The room felt frozen. 1. Full and legal guardianship of minor Eli Bennett is granted to Clara Bennett, effective immediately. Clara shall have sole decision-making authority regarding Eli's medical, educational, and legal matters. I gripped my knees. Didn't cry, just silent, like a prayer. 2. The court acknowledges the forgery of guardianship documents by the respondents, supported by signature analysis and original evidence. However, as the petitioner does not seek criminal prosecution, no criminal charges will be applied, but the case will be referred to the county's Administrative Investigation Unit for financial monitoring of Eleanor and Richard Bennett. I glanced at them. Eleanor clutched her purse, not looking at me. Richard lowered his head, fingers tapping his thigh, a habit from when he knew he'd lost control. 3. The court orders the freeze of the Meridian Trust, Belize account in Eleanor Bennett's name, and mandates restitution of $41,800 to Clara Bennett as civil compensation. Asset recovery will be handled by legal enforcement. I heard Noah hold his breath behind me. As for me, I simply sat straight, like the last standing tree after a storm. 4. Any contact between Eleanor and Richard Bennett and minor Eli must occur under legal supervision, including a social worker or independent supervisor. No private access. Violations will be reviewed in future hearings. The judge paused, scanned the room, then tapped her gavel. Ruling delivered. Hearing concluded. The room exhaled as one. I didn't rise immediately. Just placed a hand on my chest, where my heart still pounded, to hold this moment, the moment justice stopped being fiction and became a hand on my shoulder saying, I see you, I believe you, and I protect the child you stayed for. As I left the courtroom, Eleanor stood in the hallway. She looked at me, lips trembling. You think I'm a bad mother, she whispered, but I never thought you'd go against your blood. I met her eyes, for the first time, without flinching. I didn't go against anyone. I chose Eli. And if that hurts you, it's because you forgot that I was once a child left behind too. I didn't wait for a reply, just turned. In my arms, Eli opened his eyes, burrowing into my shoulder. I walked out of the courthouse, for the first time, not as someone carrying the burden, but as the one who officially carries the name, as mother. I came home with Noah and Eli that afternoon, sunlight slanting through the curtains, casting long lines across the wooden floor. Eli slept soundly on my shoulder, his breath soft and steady, while Noah washed cups in the kitchen as if nothing had ever been chaotic. But something had changed forever. I no longer had to explain who I was in this child's life. I was his mother. No question mark needed, no more hiding the truth behind justifications for others. A week after the hearing, I received an email from the court confirming the legal guardianship papers had been finalized. I printed it, framed it in a small silver frame, and placed it on the bookshelf next to a photo of Eli's first smile. Maggie stopped by, bringing a tin box filled with homemade ginger cookies. She handed me a small envelope with a handwritten note inside. "You've done what no adult in this family ever dared to do. You chose the child, not the silence. I'm proud of you. Maggie." I folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer with my journal. Noah moved in by the end of the month. No ceremony, no elaborate promises. Just one morning he asked, "Well, do you want me to stay for good?" And I replied simply, "I want Eli to see a man who doesn't walk away." We started rearranging the apartment, resetting the space, buying a new playmat for Eli, hanging the prints I designed on the walls. I began taking more freelance work from local cafes, opened a small Etsy shop, selling prints, greeting cards, and minimalist logos. Maggie shared the link in her neighborhood Facebook group. A week later, I received my first out-of-state order. Eli started crawling, then took his first shaky steps one Saturday morning. I sat on the floor, arms open, tears falling as he stumbled, fell, then pulled himself up, and walked again. Without looking back, without asking to be carried. Just like me. I had fallen, but I didn't stay where I was left. One rainy day, I sat alone, flipped open my old notebook, and reread the first journal entry. "I don't know if I can survive this, but I'm the last one who stayed." I added underneath, "And it turns out that's what saved me." I don't know if Eleanor and Richard ever truly felt remorse. I no longer wait for it. I've stopped hoping for apologies, not because I don't need them, but because I've learned how to live without depending on them. Family to me now isn't where we're born. It's where we choose to stay. In the long nights, in the diaper changes, in the morning laughter of a child someone else walked away from. And when I look at Eli, bright eyes, tiny hand wrapped around mine, I know. Some things aren't born of blood, but of trust. And love isn't something we demand. It's something we choose to repeat, every day, without retreat. My story isn't the only one. Out there are hundreds, thousands like me, once left behind, once labeled the burden bearer, once silenced by the words, family ties. But if you've listened this far, thank you. Thank you for seeing an imperfect mother who chose to stay. Thank you for hearing the voice of a child through sleep, laughter, and unspoken sorrow. If you've ever been the one turned away by your own family, or if you're standing on the edge between silence and speaking out, know this: you are not alone, and you are not invisible. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. We want to hear your story, and if you'd like to help us continue sharing journeys like this, journeys of truth, healing, and ordinary people who never gave up, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.